Welcome to Follow Your Joy podcast, where intuition is the doorway to your wisdom, your genius, and your joy. I'm your host, Marla Diane, and I've been transforming creative entrepreneurs' lives for over 26 years. Through 2 businesses as a success coach and a business strategist, and prior to that, an entertainment publicist and a talent manager for 2 decades. It's time to make joy your inner GPS for life and business decisions rather than lean on your logic and reason first. You'll not only be following what is most authentic to you and for you, but you will live the beautiful life that's meant just for you. You'll come to learn that following your joy is a life and a business strategy. Listen in for inspiring entrepreneurial stories and solocasts that illuminate how by trusting your intuition, you'll create a fulfilling result. Want to learn how to access, trust, or up-level your intuition? Join me in the conversation to find out how. We are back. And I have I've got a sweet missive from a prolific writer author, Mark Nepo. Do you know him? And this is from his book, The Book of Awakening. So it's a very spiritual book. So hopefully that's on your, practice. And spirituality is whatever you make it. But it's a lovely, lovely really book of kind of poems and meditations. So I wanted to share this with you. It's called Cracks of Light. And I find that it's quite timely given the holidays and the end of the year. And again, paying attention to your spiritual practices and self-care, like I said in the previous episode about taking good care of yourself during the holidays, because, we can really get swept away with expectations. It's like, you know what? In moderation, take care of you. So let me kind of quickly read this before I introduce you to my wonderful guest. So hang tight. Cracks of Light. And by the way, I'm going to be using the word, he writes the word God. You can make that whatever you want. Spirit, Buddha, Amen, whatever you want to make that word. It's not specific. So God, like the sun, emanates on all, on the hill exposed in the open, on the plant growing in the window, even on the weed getting cracks of light under the porch. The same source of spirit emanates on our different lives, regardless of our circumstances. Thus, our experience and perception of God in the world may be limited and different, may even change, but that doesn't define or limit the source. And though the sun appears to disappear every day, it is the earth that turns away, causing night. Likewise, when it appears that God, spirit, whatever you want to call it, is nowhere to be found, it is we in the turmoil of our lives who turns away and are turned away and back again and again. But unlike weeds that grow under the porch, we can move back into the light. So he recommends this is a daytime meditation. Sit quietly in your room and watch the light outside move through the trees. Kind of like that one. After a time, keep breathing deeply and slowly rise and go outside into the light. Walk directly into a patch of light. Inhale cleanly and feel its warmth all over and stay there. Isn't that nice? I love that. It's just so, it's so Mark Nepo, and it's really true about life. It's called, stop and smell the roses, right? Let's move to our smart, vibrant, outgoing guest, Brianne Cohen, who is owner of Brianne Cohen Wine and Events, a Los Angeles-based certified sommelier, wine writer, and wine educator, offering both in-person and virtual interactive wine tasting experiences for corporate groups with the goal of number one, engaging and building culture with internal teams. And number two, allowing salespeople to connect with their clients and prospects through a shared sensory experience. And you know what? It's interesting how she does this is through highlighting, this is about diversity, everybody, which I think is a really clever niche about the, it's BIPOC, which stands for the Black, Indigenous People of Color, LGBT and female owned wineries. Is that not like, like I said, what a great niche. Companies she's worked with include Delta and Pinterest and TikTok and Marriott, Dell, Hotels.com, Google, and Amazon. And during the pandemic, which she's going to tell you a little more about that story. During the pandemic, she hosted over 200 virtual tasting experiences for her corporate clients and saw over 7,000 people on her Zoom screen. Wow, incredible. Welcome, Brianne.
Hey, Marla, so happy to be here.
Well, I'm thrilled that you're here, and everybody, you'll hear why. So I must note is that Brianne also, this is part of her background, her expertise, is that she holds you pronounce it WSET, is that right?
WSET.
WSET, okay, WSET diploma certificate. That's for the sommelier. Which is considered the stepping stone to the Master of Wine, and also holds an MBA from Loyola Marymount University. And she writes for leading publications, including Decanter, Monarch Wine, Matador, Edible, and Somm TV. And here's really the core of her business prior to, the sommelier and obviously what happened with the pandemic. And that is, she's been producing events in LA and San Francisco for over 15 years, specifically for LGBT nonprofits, including the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles. Got to hear these people. Open House San Francisco and the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful productions by them and events, thanks to Brianne's contribution. All right, so before we start, Brianne, I want to share with our listeners how we met, because we know each other. And we go back to 2007 when I was looking for my next chapter after leaving the entertainment PR world. And I wanted something more meaningful. And we both, Brianne and I both love travel. And we found ourselves working together in a multi-level travel company. You remember that?
A long time ago.
Long time ago, like I said, about 2007. And that began our now 15-year friendship. And a few years ago, we reconnected on Facebook at the time that Brianne was graduating with her certificate program. And she was trying to figure out how to include the wine education into her current event planning brand. Yeah. And so going forward, coaching for almost a year, I believe it was, followed. Mm-hmm. And today she's a proud owner of an educational event production company. And she's going to give you those details. Like I said, there's a lot to this gal, and she's got so much to share. So let's dive in. Give the listeners kind of a glimpse of your story as to what inspired you to monetize your passion of events and then wine education.
Yeah, I mean, I've been producing events, like you said, for about 15 years, and I chose event planning as, sort of that career in my first entrepreneurial venture after friends and family constantly told me how well I, did at putting on gatherings, social gatherings, group trips. I was always the one organizing everything. And it's a bit cliche, but that's really how a lot of event planners get started. And you probably know that, Marla, having worked with so many people in the event industry, you sort of put on things for yourself and your friends and family, and they say, gosh, you're good at that. And then you have the opportunity to maybe try it on your own. And then that's actually when we met in 2007. That year, I decided to volunteer for some nonprofits just to help them in planning events. And that's really how I got started. I was always someone who volunteered in my personal life, and I had been given advice that that's a great way to get started. Is nonprofits have a lot of events they need to put on, and they need assistance and volunteers. So that's how I sort of got my feet wet in that world. And then I never left the nonprofit world after that, because planning a party with a purpose makes it so much more important and impactful than just planning a social gathering.
Right, absolutely. And then we'll kind of segue into then how you added the wine education. In fact, let's talk about that for a minute. Is how long have you loved wine? I mean, where did wine show up on this journey of Brianne?
Yeah, wine, it was a very natural transition for me. I've always enjoyed wine. I've always drank wine, didn't know much about it, but it just all came very natural. And so I was a lover of wine, and I'm sort of one of those consummate students. If I'm really into something, I want to read books, I want to learn more. Yeah. And so that's what I did. Is I decided, I found out in Los Angeles you could take wine classes just as a wine enthusiast, with no intention of making a career out of it. So I just did it for my own personal enrichment. And I ended up studying wine for about 5 years. And then before I knew it, I found myself in that WSET diploma certification. That was a huge commitment. It was thousands of dollars. It was 3 years, just that one certification. And I thought, all right, this is a step. And I didn't know if I was willing to take it. I took a year off. And then with my husband's support and encouragement, I decided to take that step in 2015 to start that 3-year program.
Very good. Yeah, I have definitely, prior to, understanding that with you, is I do understand that 3-year program, that commitment, it's pretty deep. Again, being that the podcast, the theme is about following your joy. What brings you the most joy, right, in your work and your business?
I think there's a couple things, when we're talking about wine, which is really my predominant business right now, communicating and speaking about wine, helping people get closer to finding wine that knocks their socks off. That is what really gets me going. So it happens all the time. You see people, you introduce them to something new or unfamiliar in the wine realm, and they taste it and their eyes sort of light up and they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Because what happens is people don't know a lot about wine. So they end up in what I call a wine rut. You kind of always just get the same thing. You order the same thing. You figure out you like New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, and that's just what you do. And then 5 years later, you wake up and you're kind of like, I'd like to try something new. And so I love helping people with that. So I get so much joy, and it's so basic. And honestly, it happens almost every day in my business, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on a virtual tasting with a corporate group, and someone tells me, oh, hey, thank you so much. This wine is incredible. I thought I hated Merlot, but now I love Merlot, or something like that. So that sort of, it's almost like being a child. It's just like that wonder, that awe that people get when you introduce them to something that they don't know about is just really incredible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you're always really good. It's one of the things I, praise about you, is that you always find the fun. Yeah. You always find the fun in mostly everything, right?
Yeah, I've never been one of those people that, separates life from work, fun from not fun. It's just, I'm here for whatever amount of time that the universe is going to give me. And I just want to make the most of every single day. That is just how I approach the day, my life, my work. And so, I don't want to go do something boring, unfulfilling, not joyful to, bring money into my life. I want to do things that are fun and joyful. And that's just, I'm so lucky. I feel so blessed that I actually get to do that every day.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like you really have monetized, your joys, your passion. That's really great. And this may be a tough question to ask. However, I'm going to phrase it as of now. Do you have any favorite wines that have come across you come across, hundreds and hundreds of wines over the last several years that, I've watched you evolve. But yeah, are there any favorite wines that you want to throw out there?
Yes, I mean, yes, I do come across a lot of wines. I actually just crossed the 500 wine mark, and that when I say that, I mean I have a spreadsheet of all the wines that that I've spoken about, recommended, given tasting notes, tasting scores, and I literally just crossed 500 bottles that I've been talking about. So that's pretty awesome. I was like, that's a lot of wine.
That's a lot of
My
wine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. My favorite wine, I don't have one favorite wine because believe it or not, Marla, that's the most common question I get asked as
I
a
bet.
sommelier. What is your favorite wine?
Yeah, I
And
bet.
so I'll say my favorite type of wine or style of wine is sparkling wine, bubbles.
Okay.
It's just going back to joy and celebration. And
Yeah.
it's this type of wine that people, for whatever reason, think that it's relegated to that. They think, okay, on New Year's Eve, I'll pop some bubbles. A toast at a wedding, you have some sparkling wine or champagne. And my whole philosophy is that there is no day that champagne will not make better. So, pop it open at any point, at any time. You don't have to wait for the occasion. The occasion and the celebration is the day. So bubbly for sure is my number one thing. And I always tell people, and this is my own advice, but I followed it when I was studying, which is when you're studying wine and learning about new wines, it's all about encountering new things. You want to try a new wine every single time when you're studying because you want to get more familiarity. And I've kept that same sort of student's mind. And it's actually been really great. So I never have an answer to that because I try never to drink the same wine twice. It's kind of a weird thing, but I just like to always try something new.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's a pretty fair answer. I had a feeling you were going to come up with something, pretty broad, because I can't even
Yeah.
imagine, especially after drinking and tasting 500 different wines. And by the way, in fact, I think I saw this on one of your, Instagram stories. People asked you, it's like, are you really drinking that much wine? And your answer was, what was your
No,
answer? No.
I always clarify, I taste a lot of wine, but I don't actually drink a lot of wine. If anything, my wine consumption has gone down because
Okay.
I'm just around it so much. But I taste wine, and unfortunately, we do have spit cups. And so we spit the wine out so that we
Right.
don't, imbibe too much because the way that my life works is sometimes I find myself on an 8 a.m. Zoom with an Italian winemaker tasting their wines. And of course, I'm not going to be drinking at 8 a.m. my time.
Yeah.
So I'll just taste and spit. So that's the secret. That's the trick.
That is, everybody. That is the secret. I mean, I had the same question when you began doing this. I thought she couldn't possibly be drinking all that. It's like, how would she even operate,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, good. All right. Thank you for that. The joy in our life, is a life and a business strategy. It's not just a good feeling, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's literally when you listen in and you really follow that joy in your career, right? That's the magic. That's where you need to be, right? And by following your joy, it means what you're doing is listening to your intuition, not your head, but your heart. Right. So share a story, if you would, about your life or business. I know you've got plenty of these stories. When you followed your intuition, that turned into, a joyful, fulfilling result.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly have to speak to my career pivot that happened that, you had a front row seat for because we were already working together and sort of engaging and everything. And then all of a sudden this pandemic hit and everyone was kind of stopped in their tracks.
Yeah.
So the career pivot for me that happened due to COVID, I had that successful, 12-year at that point event planning business under my belt. And before COVID hit, I was actually working, as you mentioned, Marla, to birth this new service offering. I wanted to offer wine tasting experiences for corporate groups as a team building activity. It was a slow start, honestly, but I persisted and I just really loved it. And I had this successful business also happening at the same time, that event planning business. So it allowed me the freedom to just keep trying and keep pushing to try to get this wine education business going. And, when the pandemic hit, that event planning business was completely decimated, like every live event business. I lost 100% of my clients in revenue in about a 2 to 3 week period in March of 2020.
Wow.
And I was I mean, I think we can all kind of remember back to how we felt at that moment in time. It was just a strange time. I was terrified about my business and everything I had worked so hard to build, but I was also strangely comforted that everyone was going through the same thing. It wasn't like, what did I do? It was like, this is just something that's happening, and I understand that I cannot fix it, and so at that point, around March 15th, honestly, is when, lockdown started hitting in around the world. I had this idea to host a virtual wine tasting, which is, now a term that's very common, but it just came to me. Like you said, it was gut, it was intuition. I just thought, we're all home alone. This is a kind of a scary time in the world. We can't come together. We're isolating. How can we figure this out? Maybe it's on a screen face to face, and we can all have a glass of wine at home. So maybe I can figure out a way to do a virtual wine tasting. Yeah. Total intuition, gut instinct, like you said. And so I invited my audience, social media, friends and family. My robust newsletter list of about 20 people, I think, is how many people I had on my newsletter list in March of 2020. I invited my people to taste virtually, whatever that was going to look like. And I ended up with 120 people on that first Zoom. And it was simultaneously while the governor here in California was locking us down. We were watching it on the TV. People were chatting about it. My husband was helping me do the technology. And it was wild. I was blown away that this many people came to support at that time. That was just so scary, I think, for everyone. And so that's how Virtual Vino was born. So that intuition, that gut instinct that I had of virtual wine tasting, it wasn't even a thing. I just sort of had this feeling that we needed to do something else. We couldn't just sit at home alone, staring at the wall, and so my Virtual Vino business was born, and my business focus then shifted strictly to wine education, since I was not producing live events. And for the 2 years of that time frame, all I did was deliver these virtual tasting experiences for corporate groups. Essentially, like you've reminded me, Marla, that's exactly what I wanted before the pandemic hit. It took the pandemic. That was the gift and the challenge, as you always say. It took the pandemic for that to happen and materialize. So it was kind of a strange time. Highest of highs, lowest of lows, kind of all happening at the same time.
Yeah. And as a result of following your intuition and that, taking off, what happened to your business?
Well, my business grew immensely. It's my 2020, at that point, at the end of 2020, was my best year in business. And that was my 13th year in business. My business doubled from the year before. 2021 doubled again. So I actually had a quadruple growth in my business in 2 years during the pandemic. That was just totally unexpected. And that was immediately after I lost 100% of it. So it was a lot of things, lots of ups and lots of downs, but ultimately that the pandemic really helped me to find my voice in wine and essentially execute what I had been trying to do before the pandemic, but I just sort of figured it out how to do it virtually. And it ended up being a really great way to communicate with people.
Yeah. It's like I've said congratulations a handful of times. And it's just like every time I hear the story, it's quite amazing, to watch and witness this, which we all did, because you're part of the creative roundtable that I was doing as well. And it's just literally, we were on the front lines almost, moment by moment, month by month with you. And you're like, oh yeah, this is what's happening now. Oh my God, it just doubled. And oh my gosh, we have 300 people. It's just like, it kept going and going. Right. And it's obviously a good problem to have as an entrepreneur, but boy, do you have to really take a step back and go, yikes, what do I do with all this growth? Right. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. That was a huge learning curve for me as well, to sort of in the midst of the pandemic to sort of, like you said, figure out what does this growth look like? How does this look like for my life? And then now that we're coming back in person, how do I sort of integrate all of these changes back into what my life will look like now?
Yeah. And you actually mentioned in our pre-discussion, is you called it a reverse pivot. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's I keep saying that like it's gonna stick. Pivot is the word. We all said pivot, right? To the point of exhaustion, and people now don't like that word, but we all had to pivot, obviously. Mm-hmm. And we were in our homes, forced to be alone or isolated, whatever you want to call that. And then now we are having and have had to go out into the real world again and figure out how does virtual communicating now work into our new life? Because we know now we don't always have to be in person to do everything. We can do some stuff virtually really effectively. But then also sometimes you really need that one-on-one connection. So I'm calling it the reverse pivot. Like we're having to go back and figure out, we're not going to go back to what it used to be.
Right.
It's this new normal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the hybrid version for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you're right. I mean, it's taking time to probably the last half of the year, if you will, the last 6 months of really trying to find our sweet spot, because we were so forced into a pivot. Now we're this year, 2 years later, we're like, okay, now here's kind of the new normal, which is this, hybrid version. And still, some of us are still not doing as many, live events or being out there live.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it does take some time. And I know you experiencing the same thing for sure. Yeah,
definitely.
Well, congratulations. So what you said again, and I want to repeat this. I want y'all to hear this again. Correct me if I'm right here. You're in your 15th year. That was 2020 was the best year in business as far as revenues, and it quadrupled your revenues.
2020 to 2019 doubled, and then 2021 doubled again. So in total, if you look at 2019 to 2021, the business quadrupled.
Okay. And it all had a lot to do with the pandemic, the gift of the pandemic. And I know you've heard them too. I mean, goodness sakes, and a lot of them are coming out now. It was a gift for a lot of businesses. It definitely was. Yeah. Even though it was a forced change, it ended up being a real, positive change. So yeah, congratulations again. Yeah. So, and you're back to doing your events though, right?
Exactly. So now that with this reverse pivot that I spoke of, so now I am still doing virtual corporate tasting events. I'm doing in-person corporate tasting events. And I'm also back to doing my nonprofit galas and fundraisers and things that is really the core and bread and butter of what I did for so many years. So now it's all kind of, I'm working on seamlessly sort of tying it all in so that I can execute everything to the level that I'd like to.
Okay, terrific. You're part of was it Monarch team, the Monarch writing team, or what was that?
Yeah, so I have been writing for Monarch Wine, which is a digital wine publication. I've been writing for them for a couple of years. They were actually one of the first sort of regular writing gigs that I got during the pandemic. But I think what you're thinking of is I was recently announced as part of the Decanter US team.
That's
so
it.
Decanter is a really world-renowned, very esteemed wine publication, digital and print, and they're UK-based. And so they're making a huge foray and footprint into the US. So they've, hired a few of us writers. I think there's 10 or 12 writers who were going to be, have more of the US hat on for American wine drinking consumers. And so we're putting out content and writing that is going to speak to Americans here. So for example, for me, I'm writing about wines at major US wine retailers, things like Costco, wine.com, Kroger stores, things like that.
Oh, very, very good. And I know that was one of your goals.
Yes.
So, yeah, because last year you were looking for ways to eventually start writing again and even more, for the wine industry. So really, yeah, terrific on that. Good for you. Yeah, I mean, everyone. So, this is global. So you don't have to be in any particular location to, bring Brianne on for a corporate wine tasting for your company. Come on. What a great reason to get together. No, I love that.
So much fun.
It's so much fun. Based on your experience, what, one tip, I know of many, and you definitely have plenty, of advice would you give our creatives listening about their business, about, life?
I would say, it's a really simple idea and simple thought. And I think when you ask this question, I've listened to all of the past episodes, and I hear it's just very, sort of simple, right in front of you answers, but sometimes those are the ones. And to me, the tip or advice is to trust in yourself, trust in the universe, trust in the process, you know, that you're exactly where you need to be. A lot of times they say that when you get on a yoga mat, you know, the teacher says you're exactly where you need to be. And that's something that, you know, when you and I started working together, you know, that universal law that things, you know, you need to be able to be in the mode to receive and enjoy and be in gratitude, because there is a tendency, especially for us entrepreneurs and like those kind of type A, high, you know, high achieving, high performing type people, the tendency is to just constantly be chasing and improving and growing. And, you know, like we just talked about that, the business quadrupled, and that's great. And that's important, but we also have to be in that receiving mode and be, you know, have that little pause and just know that the universe, the world, and yourself has you. You know, you have all of the answers here, and that gut, that instinct, that was probably the hardest part of my training with you when we were working together, is to just turn the brain off, right, and turn things in, you know, and especially as a woman, it's so important, you know, to have that. And that is really, for me, something that I would love for people to hear and really embrace, that you've got it, whatever you need. Trust what's inside you.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I couldn't have said that better. And it definitely is. That's why I'm really super passionate about teaching it, is that it's widespread. It's no one's fault, you know, of their own. We've just been taught, you know, to lean on our logic. It's also how we're wired. You know, we're wired to go to the practical, the functional, you know, the linear, the logical, all of that, which is the brain. But that's only part of who we are, right? It's only part of who we are. And especially with, you know, women and men, goodness sakes, you know, I have plenty of creative men that are very intuitive. But for women, it's a natural, you know, part of who we are. It's very natural, but we've not been trained, we've not been inspired, et cetera, on a large level to lean first on our intuition. That's going to be, and here's the reason being, that's specific to you. The guidance is specific to you and your evolution and your success. It will never give you something that's going to harm you, ever. Always about your evolution. And yet we, you know, immediately go, oh no, and we go back to our head. And so, yeah, it's just like, I encourage everybody, please. I mean, I'm every day I'm going, okay, get out of your head, Marla, get to your intuition. You know, I have no difference why I'm teaching it, you know? So yeah, it's a very, very important part for sure. And it's an ongoing process. I wouldn't say we arrive, we definitely get better at it, you know, over time, like anything else, you know, repetition is mastery. But, you know, when we fall off the wagon, if you will, and we forget about the intuition, I always say, just recommit. That's all you got to do. Like any other, you know, important habit, just recommit to it. It's okay.
Yeah.
You're going to forget, you know.
It's so fluid too. Like you said, you kind of go in and out of it, and they can both coexist. You know, you can still have your head and the things that are up here, and then you can also have your gut and your intuition and your instincts, and they help each other. And you have to kind of be in both to be like whole and complete.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then the formula or the strategy that I really inspire you to do is use the intuition as the guidance, and then the logic, the brain, to put the feet on it, to put the action to it of the guidance that you've gotten, rather than not even take the guidance and just immediately go into this, okay, let me get this done and this done and this done. Well, whoa. How do you know that's right for you?
Relate to that all too well, Marla.
I know, right? Exactly. All right. Terrific. So let's see. Yeah. Where can then, and I know you mentioned a couple things, but where can people get in touch with you, and what would you like to offer?
Yeah, of course. So I do spend a lot of time on Instagram. So for all of the wine content you could possibly want, probably more than you would ever need, you can follow me at Sommspirations. It's one word, sort of a play on words. It's wine inspirations from a sommelier, Sommspirations. You can also find me at BrianneCohen.com to learn about all my different service offerings. where you can also read my wine blog there. I share wine country itineraries, food and wine pairings, wine recommendations, all kinds of fun things. And as far as an offering, if you're so interested in booking me for a private wine tasting event, whether it's virtual or in person here in Southern California, definitely get in touch with me one of those two ways. And if you mention that you heard me here on Marla's podcast, I'm happy to offer a 10% discount on that first booking.
Oh, isn't that nice? Thank you for that. We will make sure that's all in the, it'll definitely be in the show notes, right? Your links, your offer. So thank you for that. Yeah, super appreciate that. Good. So, all right. Before we say goodbye, I'm going to give a kind of a shout out to what I am doing for 2023, or I should say for the beginning 3 months, which Brianne, you know very well, which is the Genius Zone, which you're doing in your business. And that is, I'm gonna give you this saying or this question for you and see where it lands with you, everyone. And that is, I am no longer available for the hurry, hustle, and the grind. Where do you go with that? Right? That's a mindset first, right? So I designed a 7-week program, which actually is content from my private programs that Brianne experienced. Is this a 7-week program called Own Your Genius Zone, right? To help you identify what that is, which is, I can guarantee it's an area that you have not, it's your highest creativity that you have really not tapped into. It's there. And it has nothing to do, by the way, with your IQ and everything to do, again, with your highest creativity and how to use it, right? To set boundaries on what you will and will not do in your business while you're in your most joy, because you're using your genius zone as the ultimate leverage in your business. What you focus on, right? Because when you're in that space, most of the time, it's not 100%, but when you're in your zone of genius, you're in your, highest creativity, you're doing what you love, you're getting paid the highest, but you're in a happy place. You're in this great place, and you then delegate the rest, or I call it ADD, which stands for automate, delegate, or delete. Whatever else is on that list, you should not then be doing, someone else should, or you get rid of it. Okay, so that particular course starts the middle of January, and the early rate ends December 22nd. And to head over to the details, go to, which will be in the show notes, marladiane.com/genius zone. And get yourself enrolled for this high achieving women's group program. Okay. So Brianne, thank you so much for being here. And
thank you. I had a blast.
Yeah. So, we always have a good time chatting about all this and life and success. So yeah, thank you.
Of course.
Yes. All right, everyone. Good. So till next week, as you work and live, always follow your joy. Remember, success leaves clues. So pay attention. And you know what? Happy New Year. It's right around the corner, isn't it? All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening in. You can find more entrepreneurial stories and resources at marladiane.com. And while you're there, enjoy my 3 free downloads to up-level your business and your life. How about you take a screenshot of this episode and tag me on Instagram by sharing your highlights of what you learned today? I'd love to connect there with you. Until next episode, take care.